There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
All right, episode 127 of Media Mothership now, streaming out of Edge Radio Studios in Nipaluna, Hobart, Tasmania. On Media Mothership, we explore how media can shape our understanding of the world around us. And we're streaming over edgeradio.org.au on the website, as well as via YouTube and Twitch. And on the DAB, you can find us by searching Edge Radio or Media Mothership. Message us in during the show if you've got any comments or remarks to make. You can reach us on the chat at YouTube or Twitch, or SMS us in the studio on 04 888 11707. I'm your host, Craig, and just me today. So we'll be diving into everything I want to talk about, which is going to be an interview that's been pre-recorded with Zackary from Print Radio, talking to us about the art of editing the audiobooks he helps put to air on the great community radio station over in Hobart, Print Radio, of course, providing audio for the Hobart community, some great magazine deep dives, newspaper deep dives, news, information, as well as their license allows them to do audiobooks. So we'll listen to that interview, and then we'll finally get around to the Bride of Frankenstein movie, with Del Toro's current Frankenstein movie streaming, and Bride of Frankenstein itself enjoying its 90th anniversary. It's well worth jumping in and enjoying this classic 1935 film. So we'll analyze a little bit about what makes it so significant, why it's worth watching today, and some of the land-breaking aspects of it. All this and more on Edge Radio. So keep listening in now as we jump into the interview with the one and only Zach from Print Radio. Well, on the line now, I've got Zach, a volunteer from Print Radio, and we're going to do a deep dive into some of the media behind-the-scenes work he's been doing. So, Zach, if I could start with how you first got involved with local Print Radio, the community station, and in particular, what drew you to doing the editing of the audiobooks they do there?
So I got first appointed to Print Radio. It was actually around a little over 12 months ago by the Vice President, Otto herself. I did a 2-week traineeship at ABC, and that's how I got to have known her. And towards the end of my time, she appointed me about joining to Print Radio. And at the time, they were doing a women's vocal choir group. So I came along. I helped one of the sound guys do a bit of recording. So that's how I got started there. Then I did a little bit of on and off pieces to help print out for a few months. And then that brings us up to this year, January. We had talks about myself becoming a volunteer, what I would like to do. So I've showcased my editing for him for the stuff I did towards the end of last year. I did do a couple of mock readings to practice out if I were to pursue a path and go on the air. But I think I found my calling with the editing and how my workflow, I could work pretty well and adapt to the environment. So I kind of found my calling in doing the editing for them.
So what's the most challenging part of editing an audiobook?
Oh, there is one little tricky one, and I will say, so we use Adobe Audition, so all the the reads will come in, they'll record on there, and then we have a thing in place called an F8 marker, which is like a shortcut to go. We press it, there's like a little mark to go. There might be a mistake, they might have read the wrong sentence, they might have just had a phone ring, or they just had a bit of a cough or a bit of a yawn. So my job is usually to edit that part out, then replace it with a cleaner take. But sometimes the hard part is there may not be a mark there, so I have to dive through the entire recording manually to find and pinpoint a mistake that's been made and delete the mistake.
So in print radio, I guess they've got a community license which allows them to read newspapers and magazines. The book part of it really fascinates me because you've had to work on some really interesting books. What are some of the books, the audio books you've been part of editing?
Well, it's a good thing I keep a journal, like a little thing up on my phone. So I've edited some of the well-known ones, like Twilight. I've done the first 2 Twilight books. So the original and New Moon, which was a pretty good one. I've done some local Australian books. I even did the first 3 in the Tomorrow When the War Began series. So I've done a couple, like, some well-known ones, some Australian ones. But there was a bit of everything I've done. So I'm currently up to the 10th book that I'm editing right now called The Cuckoo's Egg, which has become a little challenge of itself with the complexity of the book. But each book I'm editing there's a bit of fun out of it, and I get to read, technically listen to the book as well while editing. So I get to do something cool with it.
So what's so challenging about The Cuckoo's Egg?
Well, some episodes, they're usually half-hour segments, but this one there's 36 half-hour episodes, so you can definitely tell there's a lot of editing that goes behind all that.
Right, 36 half-hour episodes. So that's a long sequential series. Is that one of the longest?
Actually, that is the longest. A lot of the ones I've done, they're usually like 15 to 20 episodes. I think I've done like one that might have had like 23 or 24. So this will be the longest one I've actually ever done.
So what are these FA markers? They're like
little cue marks you just put in. So they're basically like cutting audio. So like clip markers.
Right. So this is the person that's made the audiobook, and then they'll put a little marker in it to say, crop it here, or there's a problem
delete
here.
it there. It's basically like to say, hey, I just made a mistake or something. And then sometimes I'm editing, because there's 2 episodes each file, and I might pull one myself just to say, this is the next episode, so I know go from here to there.
So you're mainly working on what the person that's made the audiobook has put up in little markers to say, oh, I swore here, or I sneezed here, and then you go to those spots and you remove it, or you...
Exactly, that's what I do. I've had a couple of instances. I had cough ones. I had, actually, I swear I heard one of the guys swore on them. I'm like, oh, wow. And then another one I edited, somebody's phone actually rang.
Hilarious.
And I'm sitting there going, oh, I was like, oh, that'll be interesting. I'm like, hang on, there better be not a take where I can give her the phone.
Did they have the conversation while they were still recording, or did they pause the
They actually did. Somebody said, I'm on the phone, can I talk later? And I thought, oh, wow.
Because what, they're doing the audiobook recording on like a Rodecaster or something? Or...
I think it is like a Rodecaster, yeah. We've got our own little mini setup at print, and we just have 4 studios, and they've all got the same software.
Right, and then they send you the
basically
MP3 file, and you just work on that.
They just save it all into the system, so it's all on the system.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm in studio, someone did it in Studio 4, I could go to like Studio 2, and it'll be there. And we all save it in a WAV file, but when it comes to exporting to go on air, I put it in MP3.
And yeah, they usually set some deadline, like you've got a week or something to turn it around. Or...
Yeah, there was a few times I've had a little deadline. In fact, there was one book I edited. This was actually for New Moon. I edited on a Thursday, and they said to me, this is going to go on air on Tuesday. And I said, what? Really? So I was like, and that was when I got to hear my voiceover for the first time on the radio.
Yeah, what did you do the voice for
I
the
did.
movie,
So I
Twilight?
record it. So I do an intro. I just say print rare testimony 1 can see 2. I read the book title, who was published, and I say it was read by the reader's name, and I go, it's edited by Zackary Roeth, so they know, I've edited the program.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's a good bit of credit.
It is. So then I was like, shoot. I was like, sat there on Tuesday, literally in my car. I went to the local bakery, got lunch, and just sat there in there waiting for the ending because I missed the opening. And I was like, this is perfect.
Media fame and fortune awaits.
Exactly.
Anyone in the community recognized your voice from print radio?
Not yet, but a few people have recognized me in the streets with bus stop from when I was on the news.
Really? Right. So there was like a local ABC Hobart news story or something? Or...
Yeah, it was actually. I might actually email you that as well.
Yeah.
I'll edit to that as well. I might just chuck that in there. It was so I got recognised in the streets. I got recognised at the Clarence YMCA. From one of the swimming instructors recognised me. And then I got recognised at the EB Games from one of the store clerks recognised me.
Right. See, fame and fortune await. You just get that media profile going from the local news.
Exactly. And a few people, I think some of the Hobart crew from the CBAA, from I think Apple Box, even recognised me. So I had a few people recognise me.
That's got to feel good.
It actually did feel good, honestly. And everybody I knew from a drama class, family, friends, they all tuned in. We have family in the mainland. So we all tuned in, basically.
Well, it's one of the perks of volunteering.
And everything. It just all falls into play.
Nice. All right, Zach, well, hopefully this little appearance on Media Mothership will help increase and spread your media empire.
I'm sure I will. I'll be able to add that to my media resume.
Your resume. If you had a opportunity to edit any audiobook, any classic or modern or cult novel for the station, is there a particular audiobook you'd love to help edit?
Oh, that is a pretty good question. Out of the books I've read, I've always been into the Jack Reacher novels, so I'm like, it'd be cool to do one for the station. That'd be a really cool one to just ed for, because I'm into the Jack Reacher novels, the Lee Child ones. I'm like, it'd be perfect to bring one of the ones I've read to the station and edit or read and edit. Be a pretty cool one.
And I guess the delivery of the audiobooks are, they're not doing the voices of the characters. It's not audio drama theatre.
No,
it's more of just reading through it as you would with an audiobook.
Yeah, kind of like a cold read, but you have an idea of what the book is. So with the editor, I got to experience and listen to how each of the readers use their pronunciations and articulations with the readings. I got to learn a few tips on how they present it.
Yes. Because, I guess part of it is getting to know that the kind of pacing, the type of accents of each of the volunteers at print radio so that you can help them as you're editing them sound really good.
Exactly, and I've actually got to meet a few of the readers already, so I got to learn a bit about how they go about reading. I gave my expertise of how I've done the editing, so I've got good rapport with the team at print, which is always a good thing to look forward to each week.
Have you ever had any feedback that's helped you, either from the community or working at the station?
I've actually got a funny story about it, but it's a feedback. It was also a funny story. I was editing a book once, had saved the file, and then in the midst of that, for some reason, the audio, the whole thing was there, the running length was there, it's just the audio just jumped up and disappeared. So I was like, oh, I know. I was just going for 2 minutes going, I didn't click anything. I went to the station manager, and then at the time he was admin. We were like, what's going on? But luckily, the good thing was we had a backup file of the said thing anyways. We keep backups, but it was something we both learned is to have a backup. Then what I'll do is I have a backup of the backup itself.
Yes, those gremlins, they can get into the system and lose a whole day or more of work. So
It is. But
very
luckily, with this one I only lost a few minutes of it. I was like halfway through. It wasn't that much of a ed anyway. I had to do a small couple ones, so I didn't really lose too much out of it.
That's a great tip for those looking to get involved in editing or any work. Make sure you keep backups. Very safe. So what type of software or tools do you abide by when you're creating the audiobooks?
So what I use, so I usually edit all the files in Adobe Audition. That's the system we use. We in each of the 4 studios we have is going to say, oh, we've got the 3.0 version of Adobe Audition, so that's probably like 20 years old at this point, just about, but it still works. It does the job.
Great.
We use it to edit the programs, and then there's been times where I might have to edit an intro and an outro with some royalty-free music. So I would use something like our good friend Audacity to make the track into a mono track, because that's requirements at print. We have it in a mono track, so I take the stereo part out, just replace it as a mono track.
Yep. And I guess separate to all this work, you've also been helping on a student film project. How did that come about?
Yes, funny, the same person I mentioned, she knew someone that was doing a thing called Bus Stop Films. It's a disability filmmaking workshop that's run basically the entire country. And for this part of the River Hobart, it was our first year this year. So I got on about that. So it's myself and I think 2 other participants, 2 support staff, and our workshop leader. So we've learned practically for nearly all year up until about a few months ago, we learned about, pre-production and production of a film, because requirement was we got to make our own little film.
Wow.
So it was a fun day. We got to work with industry professionals that a teacher knew. There was a few people that I actually knew on the set on the day. We got to have the CEO from Bus Stop and a few of the other upper management come down to observe us. So it was a fun day in itself.
So what was the organization that organized this?
Bus Stop Films.
Films.
Yeah, so what I know is countrywide. It's for people with disabilities, and it's for people that are basically above 17. So if you're in like college level, like year 11, 12, you're eligible. I don't think there's a maximum age limit, but I know the minimum age limit is 17 years of age.
Wow. Yeah, so Bus Stop Films. What a fantastic way to educate, create, and I guess get stories out there.
It is. So we done them at our film. So how we came about was, so myself and the other participants, we basically got to pitch a film to our teacher and the support staff. We got to do an actual pitch, this is what our film's going to be about. So we got to have a pitch and we got to vote on which of the 2 films were going to be chosen. And the one I picked was actually chosen.
Oh, wow. What was the film about in a nutshell?
So what we called it, we would debate on the name. We called it Lost Treasure. It's 2 brothers who reconnect after their mother's passing through myths, or basically they used to do as kids, dig for, they call their mum's myths or buried treasure at the beach. So that's what we called our film.
Lost Treasure. Fantastic. So how long does the film go for?
Ours, we got to see a few rough cuts of our film courtesy of our teacher. So I think roughly it's about, if I remember correctly, it was 7 minutes on the dot.
Well done.
We've done pretty good.
Yeah. What were some of the roles you had during the production of the film?
So since we were a small group, we got to have the opportunity to do 2 roles. So we did 1 role in the morning and another one in the afternoons. We all got to basically have 2 roles.
Any kind of unexpected or challenging things? Did any of the kind of print radio work in the past help you, or was this a whole new skill set?
I've done a bit of editing before, so I was able to help out with the teacher with plans of trying to get a little shot list together and how I would go at editing. I gave her some pointers when we did our rough cut. So I have a bit of a knack for probably from all the audio I've done over the years, so it helps in a way to pinpoint if something's out of sync. So I got a few comments on it. So, but it's versatile. It crosses both paths, which is the best part.
And so this short film, Lost Treasure, it's coming out soon, or people are going to be able to see it in the local?
Yes.
Hobart area?
So each location. So each location has a thing that we call a showcase. So we as Hobart, we kind of get to start it all off. So we get to be the front and center for our film. So I'm not sure if it's open with the public, but I know for friends and family, it's on Sunday, November 30th at the Moona Arts Centre, just out of Moona, from 6 o'clock p.m. to 9 o'clock p.m. in night time.
Right. And that'll be the first opportunity for people to have a look at it. Are there any plans with it? Will it eventually go up on YouTube or?
I'm trying to remember. I know their distribution, how they run it, they're very different to how, say, like if I made the film myself, or how somebody like me or you or any other genre publish it. So they have it's like a embargo. It's like how the movies do. They have a certain time in the theaters before it comes out online for people to watch. It's kind of like that.
Right. So again, watch this space. See, as a bit of time unfolds, it might have some public life in the future.
Exactly. That's how others go. But for us, it's going to be a good way to see it all on the big screen with our family and friends. So it's going to be a really good night. Looking forward to it, actually.
Excellent. Look, we'll put some details in the show notes for Media Mothership, if it's open to the public.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is open to public, so they're inviting family and friends, but I'll be happy to help you stick some notes in the email link to put up for the thing. So it's going to be really good.
Well, you're a friendly guy. You'll have a lot of friends that are keen to see it.
Yeah, I've got a few friends and family that are eager to come already, so it's going to be a pretty good night.
Well, to wrap it up, for listeners who are inspired by the type of volunteering experiences you've had with audio editing and student film work, what's a first step people could take to go on this adventure?
Well, for print radio, I was able to luckily walk in and talk about, volunteering, and I had a good discussion with them. And for Bus Stop, you can look up on their internet, there's busstopfilms.com.au, and you can look up about their accessible filmmaking program and how to enroll.
Right. So again, just keep putting yourself out there. And you just cold call print radio? You just rocked up on their doorstep one day and said,
yeah,
hey,
I did. I had like an email, met up with Honor, the station manager, and that's how it really came to be. Had email contacts. It's how to be. And then, as you said, just put yourself out there. It's probably the best advice I could give to your listeners or anybody out there. Just put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to receive rejection. It just means that there's plenty more opportunities to come.
Yeah, look, and I guess as full disclosure, I had the pleasure of having you in the Edge Radio broadcast training class here a year or so ago.
I know, that's come by super quick. We were only talking about that when we caught up at the CBAA conference.
That's right, the Community Broadcasters Authority of Australia conference. It was great to catch up with you too. So yeah, look, tons of good opportunities. It's a good community and well worth getting into it.
Exactly. I want to say support local, especially for community radio. You've got to support us the best you can.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Zach. And again, all the best with the future exciting and upcoming projects. Anything you're doing upcoming? And yes, that was the fantastic interview with Zach here. And Zach, of course, is based in print media, doing some really fascinating work on editing radio and audiobooks. He will be having his film that he helped work on available to be watched here locally in Hobart soon. I'll put some show notes or some notes about that in the show notes later so people can check that out. Now let's move on to the next part of the Media Mothership experience, which is going into the Bride of Frankenstein. Of course, Bride of Frankenstein originally came out in 1935. It's the sequel to the Frankenstein film, the classic Universal horror look. It's considered to be the best sequel. It's certainly one of the early examples of a sequel, to many people's eyes, being superior to the original. And what I'm wanting to do is dive into the commentary provided on the Bride of Frankenstein Blu-ray by film historian Scott MacQueen. Scott MacQueen opens up some really interesting questions around the horror and comedy that James Whale put together for this sequel film, and particularly goes into some of the questions around nuance. So I've edited some key points from Scott MacQueen's analysis and discussion of Bride of Frankenstein, the 1935 classic Universal horror film. And we'll chat a little bit further about what some of the points that MacQueen's making means more broadly in terms of the significance of this film from 1935. I mean, of course, it contains a whole bunch of what's become key tropes. The bride herself of Frankenstein with that classic beehive hairdo that we see, modeled on a kind of Queen Nefertiti type Egyptian vibe, famously became one of the go-to iconic images of media. So we'll look into some of those key things. We'll start first with the discussion that MacQueen opens up around the question of when indeed is this film set. So we'll see how MacQueen sets this question up in his commentary track and explore that a little further. So, short clip here from Steve MacQueen's commentary for Bride of Frankenstein.
In what period and place is this story occurring? Post-Tesla generators, telephonic electrical devices, and 1930s Marcelled hairstyles will coexist with the peasantry by Bruegel. Burgomasters and serfs with Teutonic names like Hans and Karl speak in accents hailing from Glasgow, County Cork, and Pasadena. Quote, "I've taken the rest of the story far into the future and made use of developments which science will someday know 100 years to come," unquote, said Mary Shelley in dialogue removed from the prologue, rationalizing an alternate universe peppered with anachronisms. Gilbert and Sullivan's operetta The Mikado takes place in a Japan that is suspiciously like Victorian England. In a similar fashion, the English-born Whale has created a Goldstadt that is really a British Never Never Land. Several 1935 press squibs actually stated that the locale for the picture is England.
So MacQueen there opens up some really interesting points around the type of anachronistic collage that Whale is setting up in Bride of Frankenstein, where we've got, on one hand, your classic kind of 19th century peasants that we see, and certainly those images later on in the film as the peasants try to hunt down the Frankenstein monster, those classic iconographic peasant images. But we've also got 1930s hairstyles and the creation of the monster. The bride herself involves hyperfuturistic, for its time, electrical devices. And even more interestingly, you have these random European accents being spoken throughout. So as MacQueen's suggesting there, one way to read this is, as Whale intended himself, the director of the film, James Whale, intended himself as this Never Never Land, this alternate reality world where it involves this mashup of various styles. And indeed, some of the theatrical show notes itself for this film suggest this isn't even in Eastern Europe. It's a surrogate Britain. So much like, I guess, seeing how Bride of Frankenstein behaves really like myth. I mean, you wouldn't be watching Bride of Frankenstein for a history lesson to see what the late 1800s looks like. Del Toro's Frankenstein, and later adaptations like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the movie, and certainly Del Toro's, do try to stick closer to at least some semblance of a 19th century continuity. But even there, of course, there's a lot of myth-making. So the best way to see Bride of Frankenstein is as myth, of course, not as history. And as Whale, the director himself, has stated, he's intentionally collapsing time and place together to create this fairy tale universe, this type of, if anyone's a fan of silent cinema, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari type Elseworld. And of course, the fact that Bride of Frankenstein came early on in Universal Horror's cinematic universe, you can really see that this film sets the tone for later films, kind of shared universe logic, much like you have with Marvel today. So you have, the Son of Frankenstein, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, you have, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. So you have various kind of shared universe logics which develop during the next 5 to 10 years in Universal kind of filmmaking thinking. So the next little clip we'll have a look at from MacQueen is an interesting one of Whale's view of cinema as transporting the audience into a strange atmosphere, this type of believable unreality. Of course, one of the challenges is that suspension of disbelief. So let's see how the analysis of this sets up with MacQueen.
Temporary interview, Whale explained, quote, "The whole of the theater, both stage and screen, is unreal, and if for an hour and a half the audience can be transported into a strange atmosphere in which unnatural things happen, but appear to happen naturally and believably, the object of the film producer is accomplished," unquote.
So again, you can really see how this anticipates the type of auteur horror we have around us today, with certainly Del Toro's work, Guillermo del Toro's work with his latest Frankenstein film. But previous to that, if anyone's checked out Crimson Peak, one of his great Gothic films, you can see this type of believable unreality of horror they're doing. And Eggers' own The Lighthouse, the bizarre black and white William Dafoe, Robert Pattinson kind of conceptual piece. Similarly, these films are less about reality and more about immersing yourself into this kind of hyper-stylized world, which certainly Bride of Frankenstein gives us strongly. So the next little piece, moving away from the idea of believable unreality that Wales is doing in Bride of Frankenstein, one of the other things you often come across in movies, and certainly the analysis of movies, is the body count. And interestingly, the body count, the deaths on screen that we see in Frankenstein, were much larger than what the final edited cut gives us. So the original cut had 21 deaths. So let's see how that gets unpacked with MacQueen, and we'll discuss a little bit about the implications of that.
Reginald Barlow, here called Hans, appeared in the concurrently produced Werewolf of London as the estate caretaker, Timothy. Upon reviewing the November 30th, 1934 shooting script, Joseph Breen, the omnipotent industry censor of the Production Code Administration, wrote the studio, quote, "We counted 10 separate scenes in which the monster either strangles or tramples people to death. This in addition to some other murders by secondary characters. Such a great amount of slaughter is unwise, and we recommend very earnestly that you do something about toning this down." Whale balked. "Kill them all. Let Breen sort them out." Whale's first cut contained no less than 21 deaths, either committed or alluded to. After Breen's sorting, the casualty rate plummeted to a mere 10 confirmed decedents. Franz Waxman's famous 5-note motive for the monster.
So just before we go into the 5-note motive, again, censorship versus body count. So it's an interesting thought there that Whale himself, frustrated by the censors, decided to just kill characters as the movie was going on, so got up to 21. And then, of course, later react to the censor's notes and work back from there. So again, those 21 deaths that are in the original cuts of Bride of Frankenstein got trimmed down to only 10 deaths in the released censored version, showing, of course, that early Hollywood censorship wasn't just about policing blasphemy or sex. Much more this question of violence was there at the forefront, and I guess Wales' ability to try and balance that violence with quite carefully structured dark humor. You can really see today as being one of those strategies horror film still uses to be able to get its deaths through censors. That is, as a formal strategy of horror cinema, being able to deliver your death with humor can remove a concern a censor might have for the moral questions that the violence arises. Intriguingly, some of the scenes that were censored out created more problems than they solved. There's one notorious case of a censored death scene early on in Act 1 as Frankenstein's monster has broken out of his jail cell and is rampaging through the village. Once he's escaped, we hear dialogue around, where's Marie? Oh my gosh, Marie's not around. Then all we see is this shot of a young girl's legs, jutting out from a bush, and her school friends react to her with these cries of, oh my God, what's happened to you, Marie? Why have you died? This is horrible. And again, people were confused because there was no context to that, because that whole B plot had been censored, where the Bride of Frankenstein assistant Fritz, I think it's Fritz in this movie, or anyway, the assistant was also a serial murderer, killing people as they were getting limbs and brains, and had killed poor Marie. And of course, the Frankenstein monster was blamed on it. Anyway, that plot B got completely censored. All we're left with is this rather troubling question mark as to, what did happen to Marie? How did the monster kill her? And often one's imagination is much, much worse than what could be portrayed in cinema. So in many ways, in classic censorship fashion, the type of imagination of the audience does far, far more gruesome work than what the censor was hoping to do, which was to avoid the audience being too upset. Let's go now to the point that he's making around the idea of the light motif. I'll play a short clip of where this motif is drawing upon. So there's two sections that he's referring to here that are interesting. And this is the idea that as the monster appears, there's two noticeable sound cues that the composer Waxman has set up for us to hear. So just before we hear MacQueen's discussion of it, we'll go back and we'll listen to it again. So this is the motif. So that kind of da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da is this idea of the motif being injected into the movie. And again, this is 1935, so we're talking early use of sound still, and the ability of film directors to start working more closely with their composer to get motifs, light motifs in particular. So that idea that we'll hear that sound and the audience is being trained to see this as, this is indicating the monster. The monster's musical light motif is around. We can see similarly another motif here that we'll have a quick listen to. Right, so a more dreamy, kind of like heroic, somewhat motif as goodness is triumph. We also hear sprinkled around, but certainly that ba-bum, bum-bum. Earlier motif is the idea of the kind of that 5-note monster motive vibe. We'll have a quick listen to it, and then we'll hear what Waxman unpacks from this leitmotif here. All right, so now let's cross to MacQueen's commentary track on this. Eventually, hold on, queuing up.
London as the estate character of Basil Rathbone in the Charlotte Waxman's famous 5-note motive for the monster, usually played by brass, provides the backbone of the score and will recur in various musical guises and developments, including flutter-tonguing for danger and harmon mutes for comic effect. As developed, it comments both on the creature and other characters' reactions to him. Poor Mary Gordon as Hans' wife.
We'll pause it. I mean, again, that leitmotif so important to get your head around in terms of we can later see it where monsters get scored as a character. So obviously in later years, we'll see this idea of John Williams doing it with the Jaws motif. So that kind of, dun 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 dun. That kind of leitmotif, the audience starts getting trained early on as the shark. The monster is around there. Similarly with King Kong in 1933, there's another kind of leitmotif used for King Kong. But certainly today we could see that quite easily happening with Jaws. And, early on with its cases in films such as Bride of Frankenstein, it shows how that early film scoring is able to create that threat of the monster and that kind of complexity just through music. So again, a great example there of the monster musical leitmotif effectively setting up the idea of the monster around the corner. And, as we saw in Jaws, or as we heard in Jaws, one of the great things about developing the leitmotif is you're not having to use the monster as much, particularly if it looks as clunky as the Jaws monster does. In terms of using ideas, MacQueen's commentary also identifies an interesting case of unused sequel ideas. So let's hear some of those unused story concepts for Bride of Frankenstein.
Out of my mind.
Blockman's treatment seems partially inspired by Todd Browning's 1932 film Freaks. Henry and Elizabeth, incognito, have joined a traveling carnival as puppeteers. They reenact the monsters drama with marionettes. All of the carnival oddities have spouses and lovers, even Emma the lion tamer, who boasts about how she beats her husband even as she dallies with Fifi the giantess. Enter the monster, wanting a love match. The bride is produced in a carnival wagon, and the enraged monster dies in the jaws of Emma's lions. Philip MacDonald's story was absolutely up to date, equally original as Blockman's and equally useless. War clouds over Europe, and Henry has developed his Delta Death Ray that he wishes to sell to the League of Nations as a deterrent to war. Henry has neglected his sickly wife Elizabeth, over whom family friend Victor Moritz is still spooning. A nocturnal demonstration of the ray inadvertently revives the monster, and a second exposure gives him superhuman strength. The monster plays with the dials of the apparatus like a child, inadvertently raining super-scientific death and destruction across Europe, decimating whole cities. A remorseful Henry apologizes to his creature, vaporizes him with the ray, and then immolates himself in its beam.
It seems to be reaching out for you.
So there's two alternative sequel ideas that were pitched to be Bride of Frankenstein. The first being, again, a type of Todd Browning Freaks version where you have a touring carnival being there, and Baron Frankenstein and his wife are both part of the carnival as puppeteers, which is this kind of surreal pulp type story pitch. And the other one being a kind of more science fiction, death ray, Jules Verne type kind of fantasy Again, not at all the version that we've ended with James Whale, which is much more this kind of complex, darkly humorous myth and morality tale than the type of a schlocky pulp fiction that was being pitched as the sequel. So I think, certainly we've ended up with, of those choices, the best of what was possibly there. And certainly, later on in MacQueen's analysis, I think we can see this where he analyzes, in particular, the monster, Frankenstein's monster, as a type of antichrist figure. There's a number of really interesting points around how the kind of Christ iconography gets kind of reimagined through the way Whale is portraying the Frankenstein monster, as well as the scenes that we see. So let's listen here as MacQueen breaks up the idea of the monster as an antichrist figure.
Fast! I get no cooperation. None at all.
The point is not that the monster is Christ. In Christian theology, Jesus is the Redeemer. His death and resurrection contain the promise of eternal life. The monster is the Son of Man, a gross parody of all that is human, lacking the divine spark, and therefore a mockery of the divine. Whale was an ironist, not a parodist. He doesn't crucify the monster to suggest that Golgotha was a cosmic joke. He punches the audience's buttons by inverting one of the fundamental traditions of Western culture. The monster, the Son of Man, is resurrected from the dead, then crucified. Strangely enough, the film would open on Good Friday, 1935.
It's such an interesting point there in terms of the type of question, I guess, James Whale's raising, that the monster is an inversion of the Christ myth, where rather than Christ dying and being reborn, the Frankenstein monster is kind of inverted from that. I guess you've got the Christ myth where Christ lives, is crucified and then dies, is reborn, whereas the Frankenstein monster is dead, and through that kind of cosmic experimentation is brought to life and then crucified. So it's a backwards narrative creation myth of the Frankenstein monster, which reverses the Christ idea. Because there is that scene. There's the scene that MacQueen's talking about here around half an hour into Bride of Frankenstein, where the peasant lynch mob have captured the Frankenstein monster and they've strung him up, and a type of crucifixion type pose. So you do have these ideas of Frankenstein using, certainly in the 1931 Frankenstein film, the Prometheus myth, where humans have tampered with technology beyond their control and will be burnt by it. So Bride, of course, goes further than that Prometheus myth idea of male human ingenuity being able to create and get illicit knowledge from the gods. Here instead you have some weird inversions of resurrection, crucifixion, a Last Supper, a false Messiah. It's certainly not an atheist film. It's quite blasphemous in many ways, in a theological sense. So you certainly have a lot of religious iconography. In fact, one scene which is censored involved the Frankenstein monster in the third act stumbling around, coming across a graveyard, and seeing one of the tombs has a kind of concrete Jesus on a crucifix, which he misunderstands at first to be a real person, and there's a scene of him trying to wrestle with the real person to bring him off the cross, and it seems he's attacking it as well, and so of course that was all censored. In a way, what we're left with still is quite a subversive, irreverent film that kind of reinterprets a lot of these religious icons in a quite twisted and transgressive way, particularly for 1935. You've got some quite fascinating parody and inversion of Christian doctrine within Bride of Frankenstein. Again, that scene where he's crucified by the mob, which echoes, of course, Christ's suffering. But in this case, it's the monster that's being applied to. He's revived from death. So in the Frankenstein 1931 film, of course, he's brought to life. There's ideas of resurrection imagery used on, in this case, the Frankenstein monster, an artificial being. There's a scene later coming up, the famous scene where the Frankenstein monster stumbles across the hermit's cottage, and there's a redemption narrative that's held out for a small number of minutes as the hermit, a deeply religious, devotedly holy person, gives him hospitality. But, the whole kind of blasphemy around the wrongness of the Frankenstein monster is what's getting set up. So let's listen a bit. We'll jump to the scene where he's talking. MacQueen here is talking about the scene where the Frankenstein monster has been taken in by the kindly old blind hermit, not realizing, of course, that a resurrected corpse being has stumbled into his little hermitage. So we'll listen here to the classic scene of bread good, wine good.
Film editor Ted Kent maintained that he executed the glowing crucifix behind this scene all on his own. Whale didn't much care for it, but let it stay. Symbols of Christian ritual are hidden in plain sight. When the monster says, bread good, wine good, he is really reading the Eucharist. This is the monster's Last Supper, complete with the holy sacraments of bread and wine. Soon, the Romans will come for him. Perhaps this explains the meaning of Dr. Pretorius's otherwise inexplicable name, from praetor, a Roman magistrate. Like his namesake, Pretorius is his own law, meting out life and death. Ernest.
Well, we'll pause it there. We've got only a few minutes left of the show, so let's jump. What's really fascinating about The Bride of Frankenstein, of course, is that the bride herself only appears for such a short period of time at the end of the film. I mean, we're talking about one of these character appearances with the bride in Bride of Frankenstein only being on screen for just under 4 minutes. Yet the bride's becoming one of these most iconic female monsters in cinema history. So it's fascinating how the length of time doesn't necessarily dictate how important a scene's going to be. In many ways, myth doesn't need a runtime. It's able to push beyond that. A bit of imagery, marketing, and timing can do wonders. I mean, if we think of Boba Fett, Empire Strikes Back, less than 6 minutes of screen time, yet this character from Star Wars, Boba Fett, became one of the most iconographic and exciting characters in the franchise. Hannibal Lecter, 16 minutes in Silence of the Lambs. So it's such a small amount. Even Jaws, interestingly, doing a bit of research, Jaws is only visibly on screen for 4 minutes. 4 minutes. So the same amount of time as Bride of Frankenstein. Yet, again, the power of that iconic imagery really does kind of stand up to that amazing impact. So look, we'll end it there with some deep diving into Bride of Frankenstein. Thanks for those that have left some messages on the chat. Thanks, Rox Ronan. Keep listening. We've got some cool music coming around the corner. Of course, the fundraiser for Edge Radio is happening this Saturday, the 15th of November at Alta Bar. If you want to check out the fundraiser concert, do look into getting some tickets online. You can find those by going to Alta Bar or going to Edge Radio and looking at the fundraiser concert details. So there's going to be some great bands there. Do come out and support Edge Radio. It would be great to see people there. and some great music. So show notes will be on the podcast, of course, as well as the website for the show. So do read into those. And next week, we'll be deep diving into all manners of other media and popular culture. Keep listening now to some cool Edge tunes on Edge Radio 99.3 FM.